The missile came without warning. One moment, the USS Mason was cutting through the el-Mandeb Strait on routine patrol. The next, a projectile was screaming across the southern Red Sea at attack velocity, closing distance faster than human reaction could process. It detonated 220 meters off the destroyer's port side. The explosion punched a tower of white water into the air. The shockwave rolled across the hull. Below deck, sailors grabbed whatever was nearest. Above, radar operators were already screaming coordinates into headsets, because everyone in that combat information center understood with ice-cold certainty what a first missile almost always meant. A second was already in the air. 6:47 a.m. That was the moment everything changed. The el-Mandeb Strait, barely 29 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, carries nearly 5 million barrels of oil through its waters every single day. Whoever can threaten that corridor holds leverage over energy markets, regional navies, and the entire logistical spine connecting Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Iran knew this. The Houthi rebels they had spent years arming, training, and embedding with Revolutionary Guard advisors knew this too. And on this morning, they acted on it, firing Iranian-supplied anti-ship missiles at an American warship in open water, in daylight, with full awareness of what they were doing. This was not miscalculation. This was a statement. 6:47 a.m., 6:49 a.m., 2 minutes of pure, controlled chaos. The Mason's captain ordered hard evasive maneuvers the moment the first detonation registered. 8,900 tons of American destroyer began slicing through the Red Sea at flank speed, deck tilting, engines screaming into the dawn. The Aegis combat system, one of the most sophisticated integrated air defense platforms ever built, was already processing threat data at machine speed, far outpacing any human operator working alone. Electronic warfare suites activated, countermeasures packages deployed in rapid sequence. The standard missile batteries rotated, locked, and fired. Every second inside that ship was compressed, urgent, and loud in a way that peacetime naval exercises never fully replicate, because this time the missiles were real, the targeting was real, and the margin for error was measured in meters rather than miles. 6:49 a.m. A third launch confirmed. Radar operators called it out loud and flat, the way trained people report catastrophic information. No panic in the voice, just the words, just the data, just the terrible clarity of what the screens were showing. Then a fourth track appeared. The attack wasn't random, and it wasn't rushed. It was coordinated. Sequential launches timed and spaced to saturate the ship's point defense envelope, to overwhelm the countermeasure window, to find the gap between intercept and impact. This was Iranian doctrine executed through Houthi hands. The weapons themselves, guided anti-ship variants with radar-seeking capability, bore no resemblance to improvised rebel ordnance. These had been manufactured, shipped across the Gulf of Aden through clandestine supply chains, handed to fighters trained by IRGC specialists embedded within Houthi units for years. The sophistication of the attack reflected the sophistication of the patron behind it. 6:51 a.m. The Mason was now fighting on multiple simultaneous axes, maneuvering hard, jamming incoming guidance signals, intercepting airborne threats, and relaying real-time tactical data up the chain of command, all at once. The noise inside a warship under active missile engagement is unlike anything training fully prepares a crew for. Alarms layered over alarms, system alerts competing with human voices, the physical lurch of a massive hull being pushed through violent evasive turns at speeds it was never designed to sustain indefinitely. Officers barked status reports, technicians hunched over glowing screens tracking objects that were trying to kill them. The Aegis system made decisions in microseconds that human operators could only monitor and override. And overriding it meant trusting your own instincts over the most advanced combat system the United States had ever put to sea. Nobody overrode it. They let the machine work, and they fed it everything they had. 6:50 a.m. to 6:52 a.m. 2 minutes that felt like 20. Inside the Combat Information Center, every display was alive with threat tracks, intercept trajectories, and electronic warfare readouts scrolling faster than any single operator could fully process. The crew was not just defending a ship, they were managing a battlefield that existed in 3 dimensions simultaneously, tracking threats above the waterline, monitoring for subsurface activity, and maintaining communications with higher command while the ship beneath them shuddered through evasive maneuvers. Junior sailors at radar consoles who had never fired a weapon in anger were now calling contact reports into a live engagement with the calm precision their training had drilled into them across hundreds of repetitions. The difference between a well-trained crew and an unprepared one in those 2 minutes was the difference between survival and catastrophe. The Mason's crew was well-trained. Every single one of them. Whether American interceptors physically destroyed the incoming missiles or whether some malfunctioned and fell short remains deliberately ambiguous in every official Pentagon statement that followed, a silence that speaks volumes about how carefully the U.S. military guards performance data on its most critical defense systems. What is not ambiguous is what the crew experienced. A sustained missile engagement in open water against a coordinated multi-launch attack with zero margin for system failure and no rescue assets within rapid reach. Every sailor aboard that ship knew in those minutes that the outcome depended entirely on the equipment performing flawlessly and the crew feeding it perfectly, and that there was no fallback, no second chance, no cavalry coming over the horizon in time to matter. 6:53 a.m. The last confirmed inbound track dropped off radar. The engagement was over. The Mason was intact, shaken, burning through adrenaline at every station, but intact. Damage control teams swept the ship deck by deck, compartment by compartment, calling in status reports with the clipped efficiency of people who had rehearsed this exact process and now desperately hoped it would end the same way it did in training. No hull breach, no fire, no casualties. The crew had performed under live combat conditions against a coordinated state-backed missile attack and come through it without losing a single sailor. But no one was standing down, no one was breathing easy, because in every combat information center in the U.S. military, surviving an attack is immediately followed by a single, non-negotiable question: what happens next? 6:59 a.m. Even as damage control teams were still moving through the lower decks, targeting data was already being transmitted up the chain of command. Intelligence assessments of the radar sites used to guide the attack, installations that had been monitored, mapped, and filed into pre-built strike packages long before this morning, were being matched against real-time signals intelligence, confirming their active role in the engagement. The machinery of American military response was already turning. The question was never whether to respond. The question was how fast the authorization could travel from the people requesting it to the assets waiting to execute it. 6:58 a.m. The authorization request reached the strike cell. Officers reviewed the pre-built targeting packages against the morning's confirmed attack data. The radar installations on the Yemeni coast were cross-referenced with signals intercepts captured during the engagement, transmissions that locked the sights directly to the missile launches against the Mason. The case was airtight. The targets were valid. The decision moved upward with extraordinary speed through a chain of command that had pre-authorized exactly this category of response, precisely so that speed would not be sacrificed to bureaucratic hesitation in the moments when speed mattered most. Across the region, American naval assets were already repositioning. The NITS had received preliminary targeting data minutes earlier, and her crew was already at battle stations, Tomahawk launch systems powered up and ready, waiting only for the word that was now seconds away. 7:02 a.m. The USS NITS, operating separately in the region, received final authorization and launched Tomahawk cruise missiles at 3 Houthi radar installations along the Yemeni coastline. 21 minutes, from first detonation to retaliatory strike already airborne, 21 minutes. The Tomahawks flew low, fast, terrain-hugging at subsonic cruise speed, navigating by GPS and terrain contour matching toward coordinates that had been locked into their guidance systems before the crews who launched them had finished their morning watch rotations. On the Yemeni coast, the Houthi operators who had watched an American destroyer on their radar screens minutes earlier had no warning of what was now crossing the horizon toward them at 500 miles per hour. They did not miss.
7:08 a.m. The radar sites detonated in sequence along the Yemeni coast. The same installations used to acquire, track, and guide missiles toward the Mason were now burning wreckage, twisted metal, and scorched earth where, minutes earlier, Houthi operators had been watching an American warship on their screens and believing they had the upper hand. The precision of the American response was not accidental. Every target had been chosen to eliminate the specific capability used in the attack, nothing more and nothing less. No civilian infrastructure, no escalation beyond the direct military assets that had participated in the strike. Surgical, fast, and unmistakably deliberate. The message required no translation. Hit an American warship, and the assets you used to do it will cease to exist before the same morning is over. Iran's fingerprints on the attack were unmistakable. The missile technology, the coordinated multi-salvo timing, the maritime targeting methodology, all of it matched IRGC doctrine for naval warfare with uncomfortable precision. These were not weapons the Houthis had designed or built. They had been manufactured in Iranian facilities, transported through clandestine maritime and overland supply routes, delivered to fighters who had been coached by Revolutionary Guard specialists on exactly how to employ them against exactly this class of target. The attack on the Mason was years of Iranian proxy investment made suddenly, violently visible. A demonstration that Tehran's reach now extended to the capability to threaten United States Navy vessels in one of the world's most critical waterways. And critically, it demonstrated that Iran was willing to use that reach, that the calculus in Tehran had shifted from building the capability to actually deploying it against the most powerful navy on Earth. But the 21-minute response demonstrated something equally important from the other direction. Iran's entire proxy strategy depended on operating just below the threshold that would invite direct American military action. The Mason incident exposed how razor-thin that threshold had become, and how immediately and precisely the United States would act the moment it was crossed. The Houthis lost critical fire control infrastructure that morning, infrastructure that would take months to partially reconstruct and could never be fully replaced. The tactical cost of the attack, measured against what it achieved, was severe. The geopolitical consequences radiated outward fast.
Washington could no longer debate Yemen involvement in the abstract. American sailors had been in a live missile engagement, and the political insulation around U.S. support for the Saudi coalition evaporated overnight. Riyadh hardened its military posture, recognizing that a proxy capable of targeting U.S. destroyers could target Saudi tankers just as easily. Tehran absorbed a brutal lesson about the limits of deniability, that proxy overreach invited immediate, precise retaliation with almost no reaction window in between. And across the broader region, every government with a stake in Red Sea security recalibrated its threat assessments, its naval deployments, and its diplomatic positioning in light of what had just happened in the space of 21 minutes. The waters of the Bab el-Mandeb never really calmed after that morning. The pattern established between 6:47 a.m. and 7:08 a.m. provocation, rapid kinetic response, escalation, expanding confrontation became the defining rhythm of Red Sea security for years forward, growing in scale and intensity with every cycle, until the same corridor, the same actors, and the same underlying contest erupted again with far greater force and global consequence. What began as a single missile exchange in the early morning light became the template for a conflict that is still unfolding in the same narrow waters over the same fundamental question: who controls the choke points and at what cost? At 6:47 a.m., a missile detonated 220 meters from an American warship. 21 minutes later, the United States had already struck back. The Middle East had already changed, and no one on either side of that exchange could claim ever again that they didn't know exactly what kind of war they were in.